Noah Grant believed that if you stayed still long enough, the universe forgot you were a target. He practiced this stillness at Umbra Grounds, a cafe tucked so deep into the commercial ring shadows of Orphean Spire that it caught the artificial moonlight, but never the direct, angry glare of the red dwarf star the station orbited. The cafe was his sanctuary, his monastery, his hiding place. Its air was a permanent, comforting fug of roasted Talvian beans, ozone from the air scrubbers, and the sweet, yeasty breath of his kitchens. Orphean Spire itself was a monument to noise and ambition, a spinning cylinder of metal and dreams that housed trillions. It was the crown jewel of the multi-species conquered, a place where commerce was the only true faith. Humans from Earth, like Noah, mingled with towering, crystalline Talvians, and even, it was rumored, the rarely seen members of the nocturne clades. The clades, the ancient, blue-blooded vampire communities, maintained a cool, diplomatic distance from the Concord's frantic energy. They had their own territories, their own rules, and pulling the strings behind everyone were the faceless, omnipresent merchant princes of the Oraline Syndicate, the corporation guild that owned the tech, the ships, and, some whispered, the politicians. Noah kept his head down. He was just a chef. He wiped a non-existent smudge from the gleaming chrome of the espresso machine. His reflection, staring back at him, a man in his late 30s, with tired eyes that had seen too much fire, and a mouth set in a line of permanent caution. His chef's whites were immaculate. He had been a public name, once, years ago, before the fire, before the explosion that had taken his restaurant, his reputation, and his nerve. The media had called it a tragic accident. Noah knew, with a certainty that still chilled his bones, that it had been precise, targeted, and meant for him. So he had vanished. He had taken his savings, changed his name, and buried himself in the anonymity of this orbital metropolis, eventually finding his way to Umbra Grounds. Here, he just cooked, he baked, he poured coffee. He was no one, and no one was a very safe thing to be. Today, however, his carefully constructed quiet was under threat. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall, the glowing numerals, written in the elegant script of the Conquered, told him it was almost the 14th hour. He was late, or, rather, his appointment was late. Jade Marin, a relentlessly cheerful community coordinator for the Spire's cultural exchange, had arranged it. She had found him, somehow. She had tasted his star yeast bread, his crystal honey glazes, and had declared him a culinary ambassador. A cross-cultural culinary collaboration. Noah, she had chirped over the comlink, her voice a painful spike of enthusiasm in his gray world. Just a meeting, a blind date, if you will. They want to discuss possibilities. Noah had resisted, but Jade was a force of nature, and so he was waiting for a they who was, so far, a no-show. He sighed, the sound lost in the hiss of the steamer. He polished another cup, his thoughts drifting. A blind date. He snorted softly to himself. A blind date is one thing. You can be blind to a person. You can never be blind to taste. Taste was truth. It was the only truth he had left. The cafe was quiet. Madre Ojea, the massive, six-limbed Talvian owner, was in her office, probably meditating on profit margins. The usual afternoon patrons were scattered among the alcoves, a pair of data runners, their faces bathed in the blue glow of their slates, and a silent, hooded figure in the corner that might have been anything. The chime over the cafe door was soft, a three-note melody designed to soothe. The two figures who entered, however, were anything but soothing. They were children. Or rather, they looked like children. Two small girls, perhaps 6 and 8 years old in human terms, stood just inside the doorway, blinking in the warm, amber light. They were porcelain pale, with hair as black as the vacuum outside the spire's hull. They wore identical, old-fashioned cloaks of dark, expensive velvet. Their eyes, wide and assessing, were a startling, luminous silver. The cafe's low hum of conversation and machinery seemed to freeze. Even the data runners looked up. The two girls scanned the room, their movements economical and strangely synchronized. Their silver gaze passed over the data runners, dismissed the hooded figure, and then locked, with unnerving precision, onto Noah. They walked toward him, not with the skipping energy of human children, but with a fluid, deliberate grace that was centuries older than their appearance. They stopped directly in front of the counter, their heads barely reaching the polished wood. Noah, his social reflexes long since atrophied, could only stare. He noted the details with a chef's eye, the antique cut of their clothes, the subtle, silver thread embroidery on their collars, the faint, sharp scent of ozone and cold night that clung to them. And then, as the older one looked up, he saw them the small, needle-sharp points of her canines, resting delicately on her lower lip. Nocturne clades, vampire children. Here, in his cafe, the taller one, the one who looked 8, spoke first. Her voice was clear and formal, without a trace of a child's lisp. "You are Noah Grant." It was not a question. Noah found his voice. It came out a little rough. "I am. Can I help you?" The smaller one, the 6-year-old, piped up. Her voice was brighter, cheekier. "Our mother is late." The taller one nodded, a single, sharp dip of her chin. "She has been unavoidably detained. She apologizes for the delay and requests that you do not leave." Noah blinked. He glanced at the empty tables, then back at the two girls. His blind date was a woman with 2 small vampire daughters. Jade Marin was going to get an earful. "She sent you alone?" Noah asked, a flicker of concern overriding his confusion. Orphean Spire was not a playground. "We are not alone. We have each other," the smaller one said, puffing her chest out. Her name, he would learn, was Nyx. "And we had a security escort to the main concourse," the taller one, Arya, added dismissively, as if security was a tedious formality. "They are waiting. We were instructed to find you and deliver her message." "Right," Noah said slowly. "Well, message delivered. Your mother is late. I should wait. Would you like a cookie?" He felt ridiculous. What did you offer ancient, child-shaped beings? He had synth blood packs in the back for the rare nocturne clientele, but he could hardly offer that to children. Arya maintained her composure. "That is not necessary. We are here to ensure the continuity of the appointment." She reached into her cloak and produced a small, flat case. She opened it. Inside, resting on black satin, was a silver sigil. It was a crescent moon cradling a star, the official court sigil of the Nocturne Clades. Noah's blood ran cold. This was not a cultural exchange meeting. This was something else entirely. "And this," Arya said, producing a small, cream-colored envelope, sealed with the same sigil in dark red wax. A handwritten note of confirmation. Nyx, meanwhile, had been rummaging in her own, smaller cloak. She produced a silver-chased box, about the size of a lunch pail. She clicked it open and held it up for him to see. It was completely empty. "See," Nyx said, her voice full of genuine, childish exasperation. "Mother forgot to eat, again. She gets very grumpy when she skips meals." Noah stared at the empty box, then at the sigil, then at the 2 small, serious faces. The pieces clicked into place with a dreadful, stomach-dropping lurch. A they who was late, a court sigil, a handwritten note, a mother who was a high-ranking nocturne. There was only one. It could be. Your mother, Noah said, his voice barely a whisper. Your mother is Selena Valor. Arya nodded, impressed. You are well informed for a human chef. Yes, the matriarch of the Nocturne Clades. She was delayed. An incident at the Crimson Dockyard. Noah felt his knees go weak. Selene Valor, the Iron Matriarch. The cold, brilliant, terrifyingly beautiful face of the Clades. A diplomat who had stared down syndicate admirals and conquered senators without blinking. A woman who had not been seen in public outside of a diplomatic function in decades. That was his blind date. Jade Marin was not getting an earful. Jade Marin was getting a wreath. The Crimson Dockyard. Noah repeated, his mind racing. The dockyard was a massive, ambitious project. A new cultural and diplomatic shipyard designed to build bridges between the species. He had heard it was nearing completion. There was a structural disagreement, Arya said delicately. A section of the new Umbral Bridge became unstable. Mother is overseeing the repairs. She is very cross, not just because of the bridge, but because Director Vaunt is there. He is a poopy head, Nyx supplied helpfully. Nyx, diplomacy, Arya chided gently. Director Kestrel Vaunt of the Oraline Syndicate is observing. Mother finds his observations unhelpful. A matriarch, a collapsing bridge, and a syndicate director. This was so far above Noah's pay grade, he could not even see it. He should bow out. He should apologize, plead a sudden illness, and run back to the safety of his ovens. He looked at the two girls. They looked back, their silver eyes unwavering. Then he looked at the empty lunchbox Nyx was still holding. Mother forgot to eat. The chef in him twitched. His gaze fell on his own hands, resting on the counter, and on his left wrist. Just visible beneath the cuff of his whites was the tattoo. It was a simple, stylized outline of a brick hearth, a design so old it was almost abstract. It was his only remaining link to his past, to his family, to the hearth order, a symbol that meant the kitchen is the last harbor. He looked at the empty box. He looked at the sigil. He looked at the two small, pale faces that were trying so hard to be adults. His safe haven, his quiet life. It felt very small, all of a sudden. A structural disagreement, Noah mused. And Director Vaunt. And your mother hasn't eaten. It is a complex situation, Arya agreed. Noah made a decision. It felt like stepping off a cliff, but it also felt right. He unstrapped his apron. Right, he said, his voice suddenly firm. Two things are not going to happen. One, I am not going to let a person, even a matriarch, deal with a collapsing bridge and a syndicate poopy head on an empty stomach. And two, I am not letting you two go to a potentially dangerous shipyard alone to deliver it. Arya's eyes widened. But our orders were to wait with you. Plans change, Noah said, already moving. He rounded the counter and headed for the kitchen. The kitchen is closing for a private matter. Stay here. He pushed through the kitchen doors. The calm, controlled space was a comfort. He took a deep breath. He was a chef. This was his domain. He could handle this. He worked fast. His movements, which had been so languid moments before, became a blur of precise, economical motion. He was not just packing a meal. He was sending a message. Into a thermal-lined basket, he placed a container of hot, savory broth, rich with bone marrow and Talvian herbs, energy, and warmth. He added a half-dozen of his signature star yeast buns, still steaming, their tops glistening with a light brush of butter. They were light as air, but packed with complex carbohydrates. For the matriarch. Then he paused. For the girls. He added a small jar of his precious crystal honey, harvested from the zero-gravity hives on the spire's agricultural ring. He packed 2 small, flaky pastries, filled with tart, red fruit, and, as an afterthought, 2 containers of warm, synthesized milk. He emerged from the kitchen not 5 minutes later. The basket was heavy in his hand. Arya and Nyx were exactly where he had left them. 2 small, dark statues. "Okay," he said. "We're going." As he passed the office, the door slid open. Madre Ohea filled the doorway. She was a Talvian of imposing size, her crystalline skin catching the light in 1,000 tiny rainbows. Her 4 lower arms were crossed over her massive chest, and her 2 upper arms held a data slate. Her large, multifaceted eyes regarded Noah, then the girls, then the basket. "The kitchen is closed. Noah Grant," she rumbled, her voice like stones grinding together. "Yes, Madre," he said. "A private matter. An outside catering emergency." She looked at the girls, who did not flinch under her gaze. She looked at the hearth tattoo on his wrist. Her expression softened, which on a Talvian meant her facets shifted from a sharp, analytical blue to a warm, gentle amber. "It has been many years since you have taken the food from the harbor. Little chef," she said quietly. "You are re-entering the world. I am just delivering a meal." "Madre." "Of course." Her eyes lingered on him. "A piece of advice, from one who has seen many worlds rise and fall. Do not let others define your normal. You build your own hearth. Noah, remember that." He nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I will. Thank you. Go," she said, waving a massive, glittering hand. "And make sure they pay the invoice. Even matriarchs have accounts." Noah smiled, a real, rusty smile. "Yes, Madre." He led the 2 girls out of the cafe, the 3-note chime bidding them farewell. They walked through the concourse, Noah's chef whites, and the girls' anachronistic cloaks, drawing more than a few stares. But Arya and Nyx walked with such regal self-assurance that most people simply moved aside, assuming they were part of some arcane diplomatic procession. They reached the transit hub, a vast cavern humming with the energy of arriving and departing transport tubes. "This way," Arya said, leading him to a private platform, marked with the crescent moon sigil of the Clades. "It is keyed to my signal." The tube doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a sleek, dark gray compartment. They stepped inside. Crimson Dockyard. Diplomatic entry. Arya instructed the air. The doors sealed. There was a faint sensation of movement, and then the side of the compartment turned transparent. Orphean Spire fell away beneath them, a glittering, spinning cylinder of lights against the endless black. The station was a wheel of human and alien life, a bright, fragile thing in the void. And bathing it all was the deep, bloody glow of the red dwarf star they orbited, a constant, crimson twilight. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was a sight Noah had actively avoided for almost a decade. He had been hiding in the shadows of the spire, and now he was outside it, hurtling toward a crisis he could not understand, with 2 impossible children and a basket of hot bread. He must be out of his mind. He felt a small, cool hand slip into his. He looked down. Nyx was standing beside him, her face pressed against the transparency, her silver eyes wide with the view. She was not looking at him, but her small hand was gripping his tightly. He tightened his grip, his calloused fingers wrapping around her small ones. And then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Noah heard a sound that was not the hiss of a steamer or the hum of a kitchen fan. It was Nyx. She was giggling, a small, delighted, utterly childish sound. "Look, Arya," she squeaked, pointing. "You can see the long-range freight haulers. They look like shiny little beetles. Arya, for her part, had moved to Noah's other side. She was not holding his hand, but she was standing very close, her shoulder brushing his jacket. "It is an efficient design," she observed, in her prim, formal voice. But as Noah looked at her, he saw the corner of her mouth twitch, fighting a smile. The tension in Noah's chest, a knot he had carried for years, eased. The bioluminescent sorrow that had haunted his eyes for so long seemed to recede, pushed back by the simple, warm glow of a child's laughter. The transit tube shot forward, a tiny spark moving through the vast, red-stained dark. And Noah Grant, the chef who had hidden from the universe, flew toward his future, a basket of star yeast buns in one hand, and the fate of two small, ancient worlds in the other. The transit tube docked with a sigh of pressurized air, and the doors slid open onto a world Noah had only read about. The Crimson Dockyard was not the greasy, chaotic cavern he had imagined. It was a cathedral of industry, vast, vaulted, and held in the perpetual crimson embrace of the distant red dwarf star, whose light streamed through transparencies a kilometer long. The air was different. It did not smell of roasted beans and warm yeast, but of hot metal, cold vacuum, and a faint, sharp tang that he identified, after a moment, as welding flux. He, Arya, and Nyx stepped out onto a high observation gantry. Below them, engineers in utility harnesses moved like spiders across a web of scaffolding, and in the center, bridging a vast chasm between two sections of the dockyard, was the source of the trouble, the Umbral Bridge. It was beautiful, or it was meant to be. A long, elegant arch of pale, iridescent alloy. It was designed to connect the new exhibition hall with the grand diplomatic rotunda. But something was terribly wrong. It was shimmering, not with a design feature, but with a sick, high-frequency vibration. Noah could hear it, a faint, high-pitched whine that set his teeth on edge. As he watched, a section of the ornate railing shivered so violently its fixtures sparked. "Differential oscillation," Arya said, her voice low and serious. She was no longer a child, but a tiny diplomat. "The resonance frequency is not stabilizing. They are risking a localized collapse at the primary anchor points." "Mother is down there," Nyx whispered, pointing to a knot of figures at the far end of the gantry, near a holographic display table. They walked, Noah carrying the basket, feeling profoundly out of place in his white chef's jacket. He was a creature of heat and flour and steam. This world of cold metal and hard physics was alien. As they approached, one of the figures turned. Noah had seen her image, of course, on 1,000 news feeds and diplomatic posters, but the two-dimensional images did her no justice. Selene Valor, the matriarch of the Nocturne Clades, was the most imposing presence he had ever encountered. She was tall and impossibly elegant, even in a dark, form-fitting protective suit that looked more functional than ceremonial. The collar was high, and the articulated plates at her joints moved with a whisper. A helmet was tucked under one arm. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe, intricate knot, and her face was a perfect, pale oval. But it was her eyes that held him, a deep, luminous violet that seemed to pull in all the ambient red light and smother it. She was polite, but her voice was a weapon, cold, clear, and precise. Arya, Nyx, the two girls, who had been so bold in the cafe, visibly flinched. They dropped Noah's hands and stood at attention. "Mother," Arya said, "you left the palace," Selene Valor stated. "It was a judgment, not a question. You bypassed a level 4 security seal. You commandeered a diplomatic transport, and you left without your escort." Noah felt a sudden urge to step in front of them, a ridiculous, paternal instinct. "You forgot your lunch," Nyx said, her voice small but defiant. She held up the empty, silver-chased box. It was, Noah realized, a perfect, unassailable defense. The matriarch's gaze flickered. For a split second, the armor of command cracked. He saw a mother, flustered and horrified, not a diplomat. She looked exhausted. Then her eyes found Noah. The violet gaze raked over him, assessing his jacket, his human features, the basket in his hand. "And you are?" she asked, the ice returning to her voice. Before he could answer, another voice, smooth as oiled steel, cut in. "Matriarch Valor, it seems your children have arrived, and they have brought catering." A man stepped out from the cluster of engineers. He was the opposite of Celine, where she was dark, functional, and cold. He was bright, immaculate, and radiating a false warmth. He wore a suit of brilliant, pearl-gray fabric that probably cost more than Noah's entire cafe, accented with the gold pins of the Oraline Syndicate. He smelled of expensive, synthetic cologne, a scent that tried and failed to cover the dockyard's metallic tang. This was Director Kestrel Vaunt. "How quaint," Vaunt continued, his eyes crinkling in manufactured amusement. He looked Noah up and down as if he were a soiled menu. "Did the Syndicate's emergency field rations not meet your standards?" Celine ignored him, her attention locked on her daughters. This was an unacceptable risk. "Director Vaunt is a poopy head," Nix declared, apparently deciding that if she was already in trouble, she might as well be completely honest. A choked sound came from one of the engineers. Vaunt's smile twitched. "Director Vaunt," Celine said, finally acknowledging him, her voice lethally smooth. The situation, Matriarch," Vaunt said, gesturing to the shimmering holographic schematic on the table, "is that your artisanal project is failing to meet basic load specifications. The differential is 3 degrees outside of tolerance in climbing. It is tearing the anchor points apart. But," he turned his bright, condescending smile back to Noah, "what would a chef know about differential load oscillation?" Noah felt the sting of the insult. He was an outsider, a servant, a delivery boy. He shrank back, his old instinct to hide, to be invisible, screaming at him. But he was also a chef, and a chef, above all else, is an observer of systems. While Vaunt and Celine returned to a tense, low-voiced argument with the head engineer, Noah looked. He was not an engineer. He did not understand the math, but he understood flow. He understood how people moved. He understood how space made people feel. His entire life had been about designing environments, from a Michelin-starred dining room to a local cafe, that made people feel safe, welcome, and relaxed. He looked at the holographic schematic of the Umbral Bridge. He saw the problem. The engineers were talking about resonance, about adding more stabilizers, about fighting the frequency. Noah stepped forward. His voice was hoarse. "Excuse me." The argument stopped. 3 pairs of very important, very annoyed eyes turned to him. "What?" Vaunt snapped. "You are fixing the wrong problem," Noah said, his heart hammering against his ribs. Vaunt actually laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Is the soup too cold, chef?" "Mr. Grant," Celine said, her voice a warning. "No, look," Noah said, finding an ember of his old confidence. He stepped up to the holographic table and pointed. "This is the Umbral Bridge. It connects the exhibition hall to the main diplomatic hall." "Correct." "You are expecting thousands of people to walk across it during the ceremony." "The man has read the brochure," Vaunt drawled. "You have built it like a hallway," Noah continued, ignoring him, his finger tracing the solid walls in the schematic. "They are structural. I see that. But they are also claustrophobic. People will enter this enclosed space from the wide-open exhibition hall. They will feel trapped. They will rush. Their footfalls will not be relaxed. They will be hammering their feet down. trying to get to the open space at the other end. You are not just getting structural resonance from the station, you are getting psychological resonance. Their anxiety, their haste, is creating a sympathetic frequency. You are not just stabilizing a bridge, you are trying to stabilize a panic. He took a breath. A kitchen line works because of flow. You do not block the expediter. You do not block the server. You create clear lines of sight. Here, you have blocked the exit with a threat. The walls. Silence. The head engineer was staring at him, his mouth open. Celine's violet eyes were no longer cold. They were sharp, analytical, and utterly focused. What do you propose, Mr. Grant? Do not build walls, Noah said, his passion surprising him. Build an arch. Open the sides. Make this a destination, not a tunnel. Let them see the stars, the station, the destination. Make the walk a reward. People will slow down. They will stop. They will meander. Their footfalls will be randomized. It will break the resonance. And, he tapped the core design. An open, load-bearing arch can carry this weight far better than these flat, vibrating supports. Celine stared at him, her expression unreadable. Sentimental nonsense, Vaughn scoffed, though he looked less amused. We are dealing with physics, not feelings. The syndicate's preliminary report suggested. A klaxon blared, a deep, resonant whoop that vibrated in Noah's chest. The temporary bracing, a technician shouted from a lower level. Sector 4. The bracing is loose. We are getting slippage. The bridge, which had been whining, now groaned. It was a terrible, deep sound, like a giant animal in pain. Deploy the repair units, the head engineer yelled. A half-dozen spider-like robots, each the size of a small car, detached from the ceiling and skittered toward the failing joint. But their movements were wrong. They were jerky, spastic, and out of sync. One slammed headfirst into a girder, sparks flying. Another began tightening a bolt that was clearly marked in red on the schematic, meaning it needed to be loosened. They are out of phase, the engineer screamed, pounding his console. Something is interfering with their control algorithm. They are making it worse. On the main diagnostic screen, a line of error code was scrolling past, a stream of digital gibberish, but Noah saw it. His blood ran cold. It was not just gibberish. He recognized the pattern, a specific, malicious, recursive loop designed to look like an accident, a ghost in the machine. He had seen it before, 10 years ago, in the final diagnostic report from the fire that had destroyed his restaurant. The fire that had been ruled an accident. The bridge lurched, a heavy, sickening drop of several inches. Arya and Nix cried out, grabbing handfuls of his chef's jacket. We have to get the load off that joint, the engineer shouted, his voice cracking with panic. The primary drones are not responding to the new commands. The chef and Noah, the man who had hidden for a decade, vanished. The expediter, the man who had run a high-pressure kitchen, who had juggled a dozen complex orders at once, took over. Where is your auxiliary drone control? He demanded. His voice was not a request. It was a command. The head engineer, wild-eyed, pointed to a secondary console. It is manual logistics. Civilians are not authorized. I have a lapsed Class 4 emergency response certification, Noah snapped, the words tasting like ash and rust in his mouth. The console, now. The engineer, seeing the sudden, cold authority in his eyes, stumbled back. Noah slid into the seat. The board lit up. It was a logistics manifest. It was a kitchen ticket rail. 6 auxiliary cargo drones available. 1 primary load point failing. 3 secondary anchor points under critical stress. This is just a dinner rush, he muttered, his hands flying across the console. He was not a pilot. He was an expediter. Drone 1, 2, and 3, he said aloud, his voice cutting through the panic. Triage the main joint at Sector 4. Do not lift. Brace. Match resonance. I am sending you the frequency. 4 and 5. Move to secondary anchors Alpha and Beta. Take exactly half the load. Not all of it. We are balancing the ticket, not spiking it. It will not hold. Man, you have to. The engineer began. Drone 6, Noah said. His eyes locked on the data. Go to that rogue repair unit, the one tightening the bolt. Cut its main power line. Now. On the main viewer, the small, boxy cargo drones, which had been waiting patiently in their bays, zipped into action. They did not look like heroes, but they moved with a purpose the larger robots had lacked. They swarmed the failing joint, their repulsor lifts whining in harmony. They braced. The structural groan lessened. The high-pitched whine began to fade. Drone 6 dive-bombed the rogue repair bot, and with a bright flash, the malfunctioning machine sparked and went dead. Silence. The only sound in the vast dockyard was the hiss of the station's atmosphere and the faint thrum of the now stable, drone-supported bridge. Noah was breathing hard. His hands were shaking. He hated this feeling. He hated the adrenaline. He had not felt it in 10 years, and he never wanted to feel it again. He pushed himself away from the console, his legs unsteady. Celine Valor was staring at him. There was nothing cold in her eyes now. There was nothing but pure, unfiltered astonishment. Kestrel Vaunt was not smiling. He looked annoyed, deeply, profoundly annoyed, as if a particularly interesting insect had just proven it could bite. Class 4 certification, Celine said, her voice barely a whisper. For a chef. I took some courses. A long time ago, Noah said, wiping his damp palms on his jacket. He felt exposed, as if his protective shell had been cracked open. He saw the basket, still clutched in Arya's hand. He had a sudden, desperate need to return to his purpose. You still have not eaten, he said to the matriarch. He took the basket from Arya, Nyx. Her composure regained, marched up to her mother. You forgot this, Nyx said, her voice stern. You cannot fix a bridge if your stomach is rumbling. Celine looked from the basket to her daughters, then to Noah. She was the matriarch of the Nocturne Clades, standing on a half-collapsed dockyard, surrounded by enemies and incompetence. And her children, led by a strange, traumatized human chef, had brought her lunch. A small, genuine, and utterly breathtaking smile touched her lips. So I did. She took the basket. She did not wait for privacy. She sat on a nearby equipment crate. In front of all of them, the engineers, Vaunt, her daughters, and opened the thermal container. Warm steam, smelling of rich broth and home, rose into the cold, metallic air. Nyx, with a flourish, handed her one of the star yeast buns. Arya, more practically, handed her the container of broth and a spoon. Celine Valor ate. She took a bite of the bun, and her eyes closed for a brief second. She sipped the broth. The tension, which had been coiled in her shoulders like a steel spring, visibly drained away. It is warm, she murmured. She took another, more deliberate bite. It tastes sane. She looked up at Noah, and for the first time, he felt like someone had truly seen him in a decade. A taste of home, she admitted, her voice soft. It calms the nerves. Thank you. The moment was shattered by a slow, measured, and utterly insincere clap. Kestrel Vaunt. His smile was back, thin and dangerous. A truly touching domestic display, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The chef saves the day with soup and auxiliary drones. How wonderfully proletarian. But the problem, matriarch, remains. He gestured to the bridge, now being held together by Noah's drones. Your timeline is compromised. Your design is flawed. Your team," he shot a look of contempt at the head engineer, "is clearly insufficient." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr. "The Oraline Syndicate, however, is prepared to help. We value our partnership with the Nocturne Clades. Let us take this problem off your hands. We can subcontract the entire Umbral Bridge. Our own engineers can have it redesigned, rebuilt, and stable in half the time. A gesture of goodwill, of course." He smiled. "Naturally, it would mean postponing the opening, and the contract would, by necessity, need to be exclusive." The threat was naked. "Give us the bridge, or we will let you fail. And we will tell everyone why you failed." Celine's face had gone cold again. She methodically placed the spoon back in the basket. "Director Vaunt, are you suggesting I abandon a project that is the cornerstone of my entire cultural initiative?" "I am suggesting," Vaunt said softly, "that you prioritize results. The Concord values efficiency. This emotional architecture is a liability." Celine was about to reply, but Noah, high on adrenaline and the forgotten intoxicating feeling of competence, spoke first. He was just a chef. He had no career to protect. He had nothing to lose but the shadows. "He is wrong, matriarch." Vaunt turned his head, as if shocked that Noah possessed the power of speech. "The design is not the liability. His perspective is," Noah said, his voice clear and strong. He gestured to Vaunt, then to the bridge. "A bridge meant for connection cannot be managed by someone who prefers building walls." The words hung in the sterile, crimson-lit air. The engineers were staring at Noah with a new, profound respect. Arya and Nyx looked like they were about to applaud. Vaunt's smile tightened until it was just a white line. He looked at Noah, really looked at him, as if memorizing a new and irritating file. "You have a sharp tongue. Cook, be careful you do not cut yourself on it." He turned back to Celine. "My offer stands. The syndicate is patient, but the clock is ticking." He gave a sharp, formal nod and walked away, his pristine shoes clicking on the metal grating. The tension remained, but the source of it had shifted. Celine Valor stood up. She finished the last bite of the bun, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Grant," she said. "Noah," he said, before he could stop himself. "Noah," she corrected, a shadow of that smile returning. "That was imprudent." "Probably," Noah agreed, his heart still hammering. "But accurate." She looked at the bridge, now a strange sculpture of metal and cargo drones, then back at him. "Your insight into the design, your other certifications. You are not just a chef. Are you?" Noah thought of the fire, of the life he had lost, of the signature in the code. "I am just a chef, matriarch. The other, that was a different life." "I see," she studied him, her violet eyes seeming to peer right through his skin and into his bones. "This bridge must be completed. It must be completed my way, not Vaunt's. But he is right about one thing. My team is insufficient. They are engineers. They do not understand flow." She looked at him, the invitation clear. "I need an informal consultant, someone who understands emotional architecture, as well as he understands an emergency." Noah's throat went dry. This was it. The step back into the light. The light was where targets got seen. The light was where fires started. I run a cafe. Matriarch. I am a baker." "You are a baker who just saved a multi-trillion credit structural project and faced down Kestrel Vaunt with a bun," Celine countered, a flicker of dry humor in her voice. "Do not hide behind your apron, Noah Grant," It is unbecoming. He hesitated. He looked at the bridge. He saw the faint, shimmering trace of the error code he recognized, the ghost of the fire that had ruined him. He saw Vaughnt's smug, cold face. He felt the old, cold ashes of his past in his throat. But now, they were mixed with something new. Rage. A small, hot, perfect ember of rage. The seed of revenge, long dormant, had just been watered by a cup of hot broth. He looked at Celine. He looked at Arya and Nyx, who were watching him with absolute, terrifying faith. I will look at the plans, he said, his voice hoarse. It was not a yes, but it was not a no. Celine Valor, matriarch of the Nocturne Clades, nodded. It was enough. Good, Arya, Nyx. You will escort Mr. Grant back to the palace. He will be my guest. Guest, Noah protested, his quiet life in Umbra grounds flashing before his eyes. Consultant, she clarified, already turning back to her engineers, her voice full of a new, bun-fueled command. He will need a secure terminal, and, perhaps, more of those buns. Arya and Nyx each took one of his hands again, their mission complete, their expressions triumphant. As they led him back to the transit tube, Noah looked back at the massive, damaged structure, a bridge between worlds, and felt an old, familiar scar on his soul, the one shaped like a hearth, begin to itch. The Nocturne Clades did not have apartments. They had ancestral territories. Noah was given a suite of rooms in the palace, a place of impossible, silent grandeur carved from the station's native bedrock and polished obsidian. The air was cool, filtered, and smelled faintly of dust and time. His window was a sheet of armored transparency that looked out not on the red dwarf star, but inward, toward the spire's central, artificial sky. He had been given a secure terminal and a team of engineers who now treated him with a terrified, bewildered respect. He was, to them, the matriarch's chef, a title that was not in any official Concord registry, but seemed to carry more weight than admiral. Noah ignored the title and focused on the work. He had called Madre Ohea, explained he was on a consulting contract for an indefinite period, and had endured her long, knowing, and very loud silence before she finally said, "They had better be paying your full rate, plus hazard pay, and do not forget to invoice them for the buns." He dove into the Umbral Bridge plans, but not as an engineer. He worked as a chef. "This is wrong," he told the engineering team, projecting his notes onto the main holographic display. They had gathered in a sterile, high-tech briefing room. "The flow is wrong. You are moving people from the exhibition hall, which is loud, bright, and open directly onto the bridge, which is a place of transit. It is like serving the main course before the appetizer. You are stressing their senses." He altered the schematic. "We do not start with the bridge. We start before it. We create a decompression zone. A small gallery, soft lights. We cleanse the palate. Then they are ready for the main experience." He pointed to the center of the bridge, where his open arch design was now being rendered. "This is the kitchen, the open kitchen. This is the heart of the experience. We do not just build a bridge, we build a destination. We line the center with small, open-air food stalls, recessed and safe, but visible. The ceremony is not just about speeches, it is about sharing. We will have nocturnes sipping hot broth, next to Talvians tasting crystal honey. The act of eating, of sharing. That is the diplomacy." He traced the final path, from the bridge to the diplomatic rotunda. And here, the communal tables. Not separate. Long, shared tables. This is where the connection, forged in the kitchen, becomes a community. Exhibit to kitchen to table. That is the emotional map. To prove his theory, he requisitioned a test kitchen within the palace. It was a stunning, State-of-the-art laboratory of stainless steel and induction heat. But it felt cold. It had no soul. He needed his own ingredients. He placed an order for a large shipment of starlight yeast. It was a rare, genetically engineered organism that was sensitive to bioelectrical fields. A baker's mood, his very heartbeat, could change the flavor of the bread. It was how he would create memory bread, a loaf that tasted, literally, of the baker's intent. He intended to bake bread that tasted of peace. While Noah was building bridges, others were busy building walls. In a part of the spire that was neither new nor old, but simply ancient, Kestrel Vaunt met with a shadow. The chamber was a high, vaulted cavern of unpolished stone, part of the Nocturne's deep strata territory. The air was cold enough that Vaunt could see his own breath, which annoyed him. "She has installed the human in the palace," the shadow said. The voice was a dry, aristocratic rasp. Magister Corvine, a high-ranking member of the Nocturne Conclave, stepped into the faint, crimson light. He was old, his skin like pale parchment, stretched over sharp bones. He wore robes of such a dark, light-absorbing velvet that he seemed to be a hole in the darkness. "He is a temporary distraction, Magister," Vaunt said, forcing a polite smile. He despised Corvine. The man was a fossil, a relic of a past that had no place in a world run by commerce. But he was a useful fossil. "He is an infection," Corvine hissed. "A human, a base creature of hot blood and short life, allowed to dictate terms to our matriarch. She dishonors us. She pollutes the very concept of the Clades by mingling our sacred diplomacy with the grimy, public act of eating, as if we were common animals at a trough. His designs are, shall we say, unconventional." Vaunt agreed smoothly, clasping his hands behind his back. "They are also expensive and, I suspect, structurally unsound. Celine Valor is staking her entire reputation on this emotional architecture. Then we will ensure it is a reputation that collapses," Corvine said. "We have a shared interest," Vaunt said. "I want the bridge, my control of it, the Syndicate's control of it. It is a vital piece of infrastructure, and she is turning it into a bakery." "And I want her to fail," Corvine replied. "I want this entire, disgusting project of cultural exchange to die. Let the humans keep to their side of the spire. We must maintain our purity." Vaunt smiled. "Then we are in agreement. I will handle the practical elements, the supply chain, the technology. You, Magister, will handle the cultural side." "I have already begun," Corvine said, a thin, cruel smile playing on his bloodless lips. "By the time the inauguration is scheduled to arrive, her own people will believe she has been bewitched by a human interloper. They will be demanding her resignation, not her bread." "Excellent," Vaunt said. "And I will ensure that by that same date, the human chef will have neither the ingredients nor the technology to cook so much as a single meal." The sabotage began, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A data slate was delivered to Celine, who brought it to Noah in the test kitchen. Her face was like a mask of ice. "They are calling you my human pet," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. She slid the slate onto the steel counter. Noah wiped his hands and read the anonymous report, supposedly leaked from concerned members of the Nocturne Conclave. It spoke of a matriarch enthralled, acting erratically, and ignoring the counsel of her elders. It suggested she was being improperly influenced by an earthborn commoner, putting the Clades at diplomatic risk. "This is Corvine," Celine said. "He is an extremist who believes any contact with other species is a dilution of his pure bloodline. He sees you as a symbol of everything he hates." "I am just a baker," Noah said, the words feeling thin. "To him, That is the greatest insult, she said, that I would listen to a baker. The next day, the practical attacks began. Noah arrived in the kitchen to find a series of new, flashing alerts on his terminal. His order for Starlight yeast had been canceled. The reason given was contaminant risk. His contract for the polished food-grade Talvian alloy for the open kitchen stalls flagged for regulatory review by the Oraline Syndicate, delaying its shipment indefinitely. His new, state-of-the-art convection ovens, which were essential for the heat-sensitive yeast, were now deemed non-compliant, with a new syndicate-authored energy use statute that had apparently been passed an hour ago. "Vaunt," Noah snarled, his fist hitting the console. But the most insidious attack was in the code. He had been designing the operating algorithms for the kitchen stalls, a complex, timed system for cooking, holding, and serving. Now, it was riddled with lag, a tiny, almost imperceptible delay. A command to heat an oven would take 5 seconds instead of 1. A refrigeration unit would take 10 seconds to register a temperature change. To an engineer, it was a nuisance. To a chef, it was a catastrophe. It was the death of timing, the end of quality. It was sabotage by 1,000 tiny, frustrating cuts. It was also in the middle of this chaos that Arya and Nyx found him, staring at the lines of broken code, his face dark with a fury he had not felt in years. "You look like Mother does when Director Vaunt is on the comms," Nyx observed, peering up at him. "You are," Arya diagnosed, with her usual clinical precision. "Very stressed," Noah scrubbed his face. "I am... my kitchen. It is not working. Everything is... delayed." "Perhaps it needs butter," Nyx suggested. Noah looked at her, and then at the pristine, unused counters. He was a chef, and he was letting Vaunt and Corvine turn him into a stressed-out desk worker. "You are right, Nyx," he said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "This kitchen has no soul, and it definitely needs butter." He turned off the terminal. He walked to the cold storage unit and pulled out a kilogram of rich, pale butter, flour, sugar, and milk. "What are we making?" Arya asked, her silver eyes lighting up. "Moon brioche," Noah said, tying on an apron. It felt good. It felt real. "It is an old recipe. My family used to make it. It takes time. It takes patience. And it takes a lot of butter." For the next 2 hours, the test kitchen was no longer a lab. It was a home. Noah showed them how to measure the flour, how to feed the regular yeast since his Starlight yeast was unavailable. He showed them how to cream the butter and sugar, and the precise, rhythmic way to knead the dough. Arya was precise, her movements economical, her measurements exact. Nyx was enthusiastic. She plunged her hands into the dough with a happy sigh, getting it all over her face, her dark velvet cloak, and her hair. "Nyx, you are not kneading it. You are assaulting it," Arya chided. "I am making it fluffy with my rage," Nyx declared, slamming the dough onto the counter. Noah laughed. It was a real, deep laugh that startled him. He had not laughed like that in a decade. "Chef Noah," Nyx asked, pausing her assault. "Yes, Nyx." "You are a sorcerer," she said with absolute certainty. Noah stopped kneading. "I am a baker. Nyx." "No," she insisted, pointing a dough-covered finger at him. "You are. When you are not here, Mother is. She is made of ice. She forgets to eat. She forgets to sleep. But you give her a bun, and she becomes warm. You control her with butter." She nodded, satisfied. "That is high sorcery," Arya sighed, dusting flour from her hands. "Nyx, that is reductive. He is clearly a kitchen wizard." Noah looked at the two of them, covered in flour, and felt a dangerous, unfamiliar warmth in his chest. It was the same feeling he had when a loaf of bread rose perfectly in the oven. Later that night, long after the moon brioche had been baked, consumed, and declared a victory, Noah returned to the lab. The kitchen was quiet again. The warmth was gone, but the anger remained. He sat at the terminal. He looked at the lagging, corrupted code. It was not just sloppy. It was deliberate. It was elegant. And it was familiar. He pushed aside the surface commands and dug deep into the kernel of the operating system. He ran a diagnostic, one he had not used in 10 years. He isolated the lag virus. He decompiled it, and his blood turned to ice. There it was, a malicious, recursive loop designed to mimic random, cascading system failure. It was a digital ghost, a signature. He had seen it twice before. Once, at the Crimson Dockyard, when the repair bots had gone haywire. And once, 10 years ago, in the final, catastrophic diagnostic report from the fire that had destroyed his restaurant, his life, and his family's name. It was not an accident. It was never an accident. The dockyard. That was Vaunt. He was sure of it. Trying to make Celine's project fail so he could seize the contract and the fire. All these years, he had believed he was the target, a rival chef, perhaps, an investor he had angered. He had hidden himself away, terrified that he was being hunted. But this code, this was syndicate level. This was not a rival. This was a corporation. This was Vaunt. They did not just burn him out. They did not just destroy his reputation. They had tried to kill him, and when they failed, they had made it look like his own ovens were to blame. The cold, simmering ash of his grief, the survivor's guilt he had carried for a decade, suddenly ignited. It was not a wild blaze, but a cold, white-hot, focused point of rage. He looked at his hands, calloused from knives and heat. "I am going to get my name back," he whispered to the silent kitchen. "Not just the oven. All of it. It is a dangerous look for you." He spun around. Celine was standing in the doorway, a shadow against the dim corridor light. She had been observing him for some time. "What is?" he asked, his voice rough. "That one," she said, walking into the room. She was in her formal robes, the matriarch again, but her violet eyes were soft with concern. "The look that turns a man into a weapon. The look that puts revenge before all else." He said nothing. He simply turned his terminal screen toward her. He pointed to the single, elegant, toxic line of code. "He was there," Noah said, his voice flat. 10 years ago, Kestrel Vaunt, the Oraline Syndicate. He was the one who burned down my restaurant. He was the one who destroyed my life." Celine studied the code. Her face was pale. This is the same signature from the dockyard. You are certain?" "It is seared into my memory," Noah said. "This is his mark, and he is doing it again. He is trying to destroy you, just like he destroyed me." Celine looked at him, at the fire burning behind his eyes. She reached out, not with the hand of a matriarch, but of a person. She gently, hesitantly, laid her cool fingers on his arm. He was vibrating with fury. "Noah, I understand this feeling," she said, her voice low and intense. "It is the call of the void. It promises satisfaction. But if you seek revenge, you must choose justice. Revenge burns the house down, and you with it. Justice. Justice rebuilds the foundation. Do not become the demon you are hunting." He looked at her hand on his arm. He felt her coolness, a counterpoint to his heat. He wanted, desperately, to lean into it. He wanted to pull her close, to find a harbor in her. But he saw the chasm between them, the human chef, the nocturne matriarch. He felt the attraction, the deep, terrifying pull of respect and shared purpose. She felt it too. He could see it in the way her eyes held his. But duty was a wall of ice between them. He slowly, deliberately, stepped back, and her hand fell away. The moment was broken. "Vaunt," he said, his voice now controlled. "Will not win." "No," she agreed, her own mask of command settling back into place. "He will not." The next day, Noah went back to Umber Grounds. He needed his personal tools. He needed the feel of his own kitchen, even for a moment. He needed to think. The cafe was quiet. Madre Ojea was not there, but Kestrel Vaunt was. He was sitting at Noah's favorite corner table, the one that looked out at the artificial moonlight. A cup of coffee, untouched, sat in front of him. "This sanctuary of yours, cook," Vaunt said, not bothering to look up as Noah entered. "It is adequate, but it lacks ambition." "Get out," Noah said, his voice a low growl. "I am here," Vaunt said, finally raising his eyes, his smile all polished steel. "To offer you a promotion. This is beneath you, but your old life, your restaurant on Earth, that was impressive. A true artist." "What do you know about my old life?" Noah said, his hands clenching. "Oh, I know everything," Vaunt purred. "I know about the fire. I know about the accident. I know how a brilliant chef became a broken man serving coffee in the shadows." He leaned forward. "This, consulting for the matriarch, it is a dead end. She is a relic. She will fail. And when she does, you will be dragged down with her, the syndicate. However, we value talent. We protect our assets." He slid a data slate across the table. "Stop helping her. Come and work for me. We are opening a new culinary division for the entire Spire. I need a man with your vision. A man who understands fire." The threat was clear. "Join me, or burn." "And if I refuse?" Noah asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Vaunt's smile widened. "This little cafe, it is very flammable. It would be a shame if it had an accident like your last one. A tragedy, really. But then, you are used to tragedy, are not you?" This was the trap. His silence, his compliance, in exchange for the safety of Madre Ojea's cafe. Noah looked at the man who had stolen his life. He felt the white-hot rage, and Celine's warning. Choose justice. He picked up the data slate, and he dropped it, hard, on the floor. "Get out of my cafe," Noah said, his voice final. Vaunt's smile vanished. The mask of civility dropped, revealing the cold, reptilian fury beneath. He stood up, smoothing his pristine suit. "You are a fool, cook," he hissed. "A sentimental fool. You think that fire was even about you? You think you were important. You were just collateral damage." Noah froze. What Vaunt, angry at the rejection, played his last card. It was not about a chef. It was about the design. The shadow dispatch was sent to kill the conquered architect. The anonymous, idealistic fool who wrote the original cultural treaty that this entire, ridiculous bridge project is based on. You just happened to be in the way. Vaunt left. Noah stood in the middle of his cafe, his world tilting on its axis. It was not about him. He was collateral damage. He spent the rest of the day in a fog, gathering his tools, his knives, his personal whisks, and returned to the palace. He went to the test kitchen. It was his new home, whether he liked it or not. He was alone, standing at the steel counter, trying to process the information. Conquered architect, an anonymous treaty writer. He looked at his hands. He rolled up the sleeve of his jacket, his chef's whites. He stared at the tattoo on his wrist, the stylized brick hearth. It was not just a memorial to his family's restaurant. It was an ancient symbol, the symbol of the Hearth Order, a long-lost, almost mythical guild of architects, diplomats, and chefs. An order that believed all true treaties were signed, not in throne rooms, but over a shared meal. An order that had vanished centuries ago. His grandfather, the one who had taught him to bake, had been a member. He had told Noah it was their secret. He was staring at the tattoo, his world spinning, when two small figures entered the kitchen. Arya and Nyx. They were quiet, sensing his mood. Arya, with her strange, ancient wisdom, walked up to him. She did not look at his face. She looked at his wrist, at the exposed tattoo. "You swore by fire, did not you, Chef Noah?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Noah looked at her, his throat too tight to speak. How could she know? How could she? He said nothing. A sudden, piercing shriek shattered the silence. It was not a kitchen timer. It was not a comlink. It was the full, station-wide security alert. Red emergency lights pulsed to life, sweeping the pristine kitchen in flashes of blood, turning the stainless steel into a crimson nightmare. The day of the inauguration arrived with the sharp, electric hum of a system under perfect control. The crimson dockyard was unrecognizable. The umbral bridge, reborn from Noah's designs, was a triumph. It was a single, elegant sweep of pale alloy, its arches open to the void, shielded by containment fields that shimmered with the station's crimson-tinged light. The solid, claustrophobic walls were gone, replaced by load-bearing arches that gave the structure a sense of impossible lightness. In the center, the kitchen promenade was pristine, gleaming, food-grade Talvian alloy stalls sat ready, their induction heaters warming, their spice vents prepped. Noah stood near the entrance from the newly named decompression gallery. He felt profoundly out of place. He wore a formal, dark gray chef's jacket, the stiff collar chafing his neck. Over his heart, he had, in a moment of either defiance or foolishness, allowed the palace tailor to embroider the small, stylized hearth of his order. He felt his hands twitching, naked without a knife or a whisk. The gallery was a sea of diplomatic color. Towering Talvians in crystalline robes, conquered admirals in stark white uniforms, and human senators in dark suits. He saw Madre Ojea near a delegation of station engineers. Her multifaceted form seemed to shimmer with pride, and she gave him a long, slow nod. He scanned the crowd for the threats. Kestrel Vaunt was predictable, holding court near the diplomatic rotunda at the far end of the bridge. His suit was a brilliant pearl white, and his smile was as bright and false as an advertising beam. He was laughing with a conquered official. Magister Corvine was not visible. That, Noah thought, was the real danger. The visible snake was always a distraction. Then, the procession arrived. The crowd parted. Celine Vaylor was not a person. She was a presence. She wore formal robes of deep, state violet, the color of a twilight bruise. A simple silver diadem was the only ornament in her severe, black hair. She did not walk. She advanced. And on either side of her, like two small, dark ships in her wake, were Arya and Nyx. Noah had not seen them this morning. He almost did not recognize them. The practical velvet cloaks were gone. They were dressed in full, formal court attire, miniature versions of their mother, layered gowns of dark, heavy silk, embroidered with the silver thread of their house. They looked impossibly small, heartbreakingly regal, and terrified. Celine moved to the podium at the head of the bridge. The hum of 1,000 quiet conversations ceased instantly. Her voice, when it came, was amplified, cool, and clear. "We gather today," she began, "to dedicate a structure of metal, but we inaugurate an idea. For too long, Diplomacy has been a thing of high walls and shielded rooms. The Nocturne Clades, with our partners in the Concord, propose a new covenant. She turned slightly, gesturing to the bridge, to Noah's open arches and his kitchen promenade. We propose that true alliance is not forged in secret. It is forged over a shared meal. We have built not just a path, but a destination. A place where the engineer's art meets the chef's. A place where we may argue, yes, but where we will then break bread. She found Noah in the crowd. Her violet eyes met his. Just for a second. A flicker of shared understanding. A moment of gratitude. We offer this bridge, she said, her voice softening. As our communal table, we invite you, please, walk with us. A ripple of polite applause started. It was immediately swallowed. A sound. A single, piercing, high-frequency note. It did not come from the speakers. It came from inside the metal. Noah's head snapped up. He saw it before anyone else. The elegant, load-bearing arch. It was shimmering. A faint, sick vibration. Just like the first day. Vaunt. He was doing it. The vibration hit the deck plates. The applause faltered. Murmurs of confusion replaced it. The shimmering became a visible, audible shake. No, Noah whispered, his blood turning to ice. What is that? A senator near him asked, his voice sharp with alarm. The bridge. It is unstable, someone shouted. And in that first, critical second of panic, the second attack began. Sacrilege. The roar came from everywhere. From hidden, unauthorized speakers. Magister Corvine appeared on a high-maintenance gantry above the diplomatic rotunda. He was a specter in his black robes, his face a parchment mask of fury. He pointed a long, skeletal finger, not at Celine, but at the bridge itself, at Noah's kitchen. This ground is sacred, Corvine bellowed, his voice vibrating with righteous rage. Sealed in the blood of the first accord, and she, he jabbed his finger at Celine, has allowed a human to profane it. He has built his filthy, hot-blooded kitchen upon our holy ground. He has tainted the covenant. The Nocturne delegation gasped, their faces pale with shock. Corvine was invoking their deepest, most ancient taboos. The vibration is not an accident, Corvine shrieked. It is the curse, the blood oath of our ancestors. Rejecting this pollution, the bridge is rejecting the human taint. We are cursed, cursed. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. Vaunt was attacking the physics. Corvine was attacking the faith. The bridge screamed. A primary suspension cable, overloaded by Vaunt's resonance frequency, snapped with the sound of a cannon shot. The deck plates heaved. That was all it took. Corvine's curse, and the snap of metal, shattered the crowd's composure. It was chaos. The civilized, diplomatic gathering dissolved into a primal, shoving mob. They clawed their way back toward the gallery, a wave of terror, shrieking and pushing. Arya Nix, Celine's voice, her diplomatic calm shattered, was the raw cry of a mother. Noah saw them. In the first wave of panic, the two small girls had been pushed forward, separated from Celine by the stampede. They were on the bridge. They were at the epicenter of the shaking. They were clinging desperately to the railing of the first kitchen stall, their tiny, regal forms looking utterly lost as the deck vibrated beneath them. Another support, a main structural pylon, buckled with a groan of tortured metal. Sparks rained down like fire. The bridge tilted, a horrible, grinding lurch to the left. The heavy, alloy kitchen stalls, which were supposed to be locked to the deck, broke free. The locks, sabotaged by Vaunt's code, had failed. They began to slide on the tilting deck. Arya and Nix screamed, a thin, terrified sound. They were trapped between two of the sliding, multi-ton stalls. Security teams were trying to form a cordon, but the crowd was a mindless, stampeding beast. Celine was fighting against the tide, her face a mask of pale fury, her supernatural strength useless against a wall of pure panic. She was being pushed back, away from her children. Noah did not think. He did not pause. He acted. The chef brain, the expediter, took over. He was not a guest. He was not a consultant. This was his kitchen, and it was in chaos. He ran, not against the crowd, but through it. He found the gaps, the flow of their terror, and slipped between them as if he were navigating a busy dinner service. "Excuse me, hot plate. Behind you. Coming through," he muttered, the words automatic, focusing him, sharpening his senses. He burst through the security line. A guard grabbed his arm. "Sir, it is a restricted zone. It is collapsing." Noah did not stop. He used a move he had perfected, hauling 100-pound sacks of flour, a twist and a dip, and the guard's grip slipped. He was on the bridge. The deck plates were vibrating so hard his vision blurred. He could barely keep his feet. "Chef Noah," Arya screamed. His path was blocked. A heavy, decorative panel had torn loose, dangling by a thick bundle of live, sparking power cables. He needed to cut it free. He reached to his side, where his tools were. Not a gun. Not a weapon. His knife roll. He unclipped it, and with a flick of his wrist, he pulled his favorite. A 10-inch, perfectly balanced chef's knife, made of folded Talvian alloy. Its edge honed to a near monomolecular sharpness. The security guard, who had recovered his balance, just gaped. Controlling the kitchen, Noah growled to himself. He did not hesitate. He attacked the cables. The alloy blade was non-conductive. He sliced through the thick, sparking bundle in a single, practiced, violent motion, as if he were breaking down a prime cut. The panel crashed to the side, clearing the path. He reached the girls. The heavy kitchen stall had slid, pinning the hem of Arya's silk gown, trapping her. The stall on the other side was slowly, horribly, sliding toward them. "Arya, Nyx, look at me." His voice was not a request. It was the sharp, clear bark of an expediter. "Listen to me. We are fine. This is just a bad dinner service." They stopped crying, their silver eyes, wide with terror, locking on his. He looked up. The bridge was tearing itself apart. He could not stop Vaughnt's machine, but he could fight Corvine's curse. He could fight the panic. He looked at the kitchen stall. His stall. "Arya," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Inside my jacket, left pocket, there is a small, flat remote. Get it. Now." Her small, trembling fingers fumbled. "Found it." "That remote," he said, pointing to the auxiliary cargo drones still hovering nearby, the ones he had used at the dockyard. "Controls them. I need you to press the green button. Only the green button. It is a pre-programmed command. It will deploy the emergency bracing. It will not stop the shaking. But it will hold this bridge for 5 minutes." Arya nodded, her face pale but set, her hand clasping the remote. "Nyx," he said, turning to the smaller girl. "Yes, Chef Wizard," she whispered. "The most important job. On the side of this stall, there is a lever, a manual vent. I need you to pull it when I tell you. Pull it as hard as you can. Can you do that?" She nodded, gripping the stall. "Arya, now!" he yelled over the din. Arya slammed the green button. The small, boxy cargo drones swarmed. They did not try to fix the bridge. They flew under the main span, attaching themselves to the emergency hardpoints he had insisted on. They fired their repulsors, not to lift, but to dampen. They fought the resonance with counter-frequency. The violent, high-pitched shaking eased, just slightly. It became a deep, bone-jarring groan. Nyx now. Nyx grabbed the lever and threw her entire 30-kilo weight into it. With a loud hiss, the vents on the kitchen stall burst open. It was not steam. It was aroma. It was the complex, bioactive signature of the starlight yeast. His main order had been blocked, but he had kept his personal, cultivated stash. He had baked 24 loaves of memory bread for this opening, and they were in the warming ovens of this very stall. He had set the ovens to a low, precise temperature, not to cook, to aerosolize. A warm cloud of scent billowed out. It was not just the smell of bread, it was the smell of home. It was butter, honey, and the faint, electric tang of the yeast itself. The recipe field, the lost secret of the hearth order. It was not magic, it was biochemistry. The aerosolized yeast proteins were a universal, species-wide calmative. They did not just smell good. They actively, chemically, lowered adrenaline. They regulated heartbeats. They commanded sanity. The scent, the field, washed over the bridge, into the gallery, over the panicking crowd. A human senator, his face a mask of terror, stopped shoving. He paused. He sniffed. A Talvian diplomat, who had been about to trample a nocturne elder, froze, his facets clouding in confusion. The aroma saturated the air. It was a warm, golden wave of reason. By the hearth and the flame, Noah whispered, the old, forgotten words of his order rising in his memory. The bread is the bond. The meal is the treaty. He raised his voice. He did not shout. He projected. He used the voice of a man in charge of his kitchen, a voice of absolute, calm authority. The bridge is not cursed, he called out. It is baking. The crowd, their panic chemically short-circuited, looked around, dazed. They looked at Noah, this strange man in chef's whites, standing on the epicenter of the groaning bridge. Everyone, calm, breathe, he commanded. Smell that it is just bread. The bridge is stable. Now, walk. Do not run. Walk. He set the rhythm with his voice. Walk. This way. The meal is served. Walk. The crowd, no longer a mob, but a collection of dazed individuals, began to move, not as a stampede, but as a procession, an orderly, synchronous evacuation. He was leading them, not with force, but with the primal, undeniable promise of a warm kitchen. He had saved the crowd. He had not saved the bridge. The drones were straining, their engines whining at maximum. The 5 minutes were almost up. Noah, Celine. She had fought her way free. She was on the bridge. She was not a diplomat now. She was a dark, violet blur, moving with a speed that was not human. The girls, she cried. They are safe, Noah shouted, pulling at the heavy stall, trying to free Arya's dress. I cannot. It is caught, a massive load-bearing girder above them. The one Vaunt had been targeting, screamed. The resonance, denied the deck, was focusing on this single point. Vaunt was trying to bring the entire arch down. The drones are failing, Arya shouted, her voice high with new terror. Celine, that girder. It is the kill shot. Noah yelled. Celine looked up. She saw the metal, glowing cherry red from the stress. She saw it begin to buckle. It was aimed directly at the stall, at her children. She did not hesitate. She launched herself into the air. It was not flight. It was a jump of impossible, supernatural power. She hit the side of the bridge's arch. Her nails, which Noah now saw were short, black claws, sinking into the alloy. She scrambled up the arch like a panther, a vision of dark, terrible grace. She reached the girder, she braced her feet, and she pushed. A single, slender woman, trying to hold up a multi-ton, collapsing beam. Noah, she screamed, her voice strained, her muscles shaking under the impossible load. The counter-vibration, it is too strong. Noah saw it. Kestrel Vaunt, safe in his rotunda, was watching this. He was watching the matriarch personally fight his machine. And he was winning. The girder began to slip. Celine cried out, a sound of pain and desperation. It is aimed at her, Noah realized. Vaunt was not just destroying the bridge. He was committing a public assassination. Aria drones, Noah bellowed. All drones full power to me. Redirect the load. Change the recipe. Aria, her face white, slammed her small fist on the remote. Not at the beam, Noah yelled, his mind racing, the expediter juggling a dozen variables. At her no weight, he saw Vaunt's real plan. The beam was not aimed at Celine. It was aimed at the deck in front of her. It was designed to shear off the entire section of the bridge where she and her children stood. He had no time. Celine was pushing, trying to divert it. The drones were coming, but they were too slow. Noah looked at Celine. He looked at Aria and Nyx. He was just a chef. Collateral damage. No more, he said. He ran to the nearest cargo drone. He grabbed its heavy, magnetic anchor cable. Celine, he shouted. She looked at him, her violet eyes wide with surprise and terror. He did not try to stop the beam. He did not try to hold it. He redirected it. He fired the drone's anchor, not at the beam, but at the main pylon across from it. He grabbed the heavy, vibrating beam with his own hands, the metal searing his palms, and he pulled. He was not as strong as Celine. He was just a human, but he had leverage. He pulled the beam's trajectory, changing its angle of impact by a few, crucial degrees. It was no longer aimed at Celine's children. It was aimed at him. He had just enough time to think. This is going to ruin the dinner service. He threw himself backward, trying to get clear. He was not fast enough. The girder struck the bridge where he had been standing, a cataclysmic impact of metal on metal. The deck plate shattered. A secondary support beam, torn free by the impact, whipped around like a giant's arm. It hit Noah square in the chest. The force of it threw him backward 10 meters. He slammed into the steel wall of the kitchen stall he had designed. He felt his ribs crack. He felt a sharp, searing pain in his side. Then, silence. The sound of the impact was the last sound. Vaunt, his objective complete, had cut the resonance. The bridge, horribly wounded, but held by the last-second brace from the drones, was suddenly, terribly still. The crowd, calmed by the yeast, stood frozen, watching. Noah was slumped at the base of the stall. He was alive. He could hear a faint ringing in his ears. He tried to move, and a white-hot galaxy of pain exploded in his chest. He looked down. A jagged shard of rebar from the support beam was protruding from his side, just above his hip. It was not ideal. He was bleeding. A lot. His pristine, gray chef's jacket was turning a dark, vivid crimson. Celine was at his side in an instant. Her face was a mask of shock, her supernatural grace forgotten. "Noah, Noah," she cried, her cool hands hovering over the wound, afraid to touch him. Aria and Nyx were there, their faces white, tears streaming, their royal gowns torn and dirty. He looked up at Celine. The pain was incredible. He had to focus. He reached into his breast pocket. His fingers fumbled, but he found it. A single, star yeast bun he had saved for himself. It was crushed, and now it was slowly soaking with his blood. He held it out to her. His voice was a wet, broken rasp. "Apologies, matriarch," he whispered, a faint, pained smile touching his lips. The dinner special. It is still hot," he coughed, a terrible, racking sound. "But I think the plating is ruined." His humor, his last defense, broke her composure. A single, perfect, crystalline tear, impossible for her species, welled and fell from her violet eye, splashing on his bloody hand. The bridge was stable. The people were safe. The matriarch was alive. Her children were safe. Noah Grant, the chef, had saved them. But as security and medical teams finally swarmed the bridge, pushing past the stunned crowd, Noah heard a new sound. It was not a cheer. It was a low, angry murmur. He saw them. The crowd. The delegates. They were looking at him. At the blood. At the cursed bridge. At the human who had profaned their ceremony. Magister Corvine was back on his gantry. He had not needed to win the technical fight. He had already won the cultural one. "Behold," Corvine's voice boomed, full of false grief. "The price of impurity. The human's presence has broken our sacred bridge. He has paid with his blood." As the curse demanded, the crowd, suggestible, confused, and needing a target for their fear, looked at Noah not as a hero, but as the source of the disaster. Celine looked up, her face transformed by a cold, primal rage. Silence. But the narrative was set. The technical evidence of Vaunt's sabotage was gone, lost in the feedback. All that was left was a broken bridge, an injured human, and a prophecy that had, to all eyes, come true. Noah's vision began to tunnel. The last thing he saw was Celine, her face a beautiful, terrible mask of fury, standing over him, defending him, as the world of shadows he had courted for so long finally rose up to swallow him whole. "Sacrilege, the blood oath is paid," Magister Corvine's voice boomed across the stunned, silent bridge. He was a triumphant specter on his high gantry, his skeletal arms raised to the crimson-lit void. "Behold the price of impurity. The human's blood has satisfied the curse. He has broken our sacred ground, and the ground has broken him." The crowd, which had been calmed by the starlight yeast, was now a tinderbox of new, superstitious fear. They looked at Noah, slumped and bleeding at the base of his kitchen, not with gratitude, but with a terrible, growing suspicion. They murmured, pointing at his crimson-soaked jacket. He was the problem. He was the curse. Kestrel Vaunt, standing in the pristine safety of the diplomatic rotunda, permitted himself a small, controlled smile. It was perfect. The bridge was a disaster. The matriarch's human consultant was bleeding out, and the entire Concord broadcast was filming the nocturne clades, descending into primitive, religious panic. He had not just won. He had triumphed. Medical technicians, pushing a repulsor gurney, were swarming Noah. "Sir, we have to move you. You have a punctured lung and severe internal bleeding." "No!" Noah rasped, his hand clamped to the rebar in his side. He tried to push them away. "No, the kitchen, the logs. It is still there." "Noah." Celine's voice cut through his pain. She was at his side, her pale face a mask of cold, controlled fury. She looked at the medics, then at Corvine on his gurney, then at Vaunt in his rotunda. She saw the trap closing. Silence. Her voice, amplified by the station's emergency systems, did not shout. It commanded. The word hit the crowd like a physical force, stopping their murmurs, freezing Corvine in mid-gesture. "The inauguration is not cancelled," Celine announced, her voice ringing with absolute authority. The broadcast cameras, still live, zoomed in on her. "It is suspended. This," she gestured to the broken girder, the wounded man, the panicked crowd, "is not the end of our ceremony. It is the beginning of our inquiry." She turned, her violet eyes burning. She was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at the camera, at the entire Concord. The Umbral Bridge was designed as a place of transparency, of open diplomacy, of a communal table. That is what it shall be. What you have witnessed is not a curse. It is a crime. She pointed to the ruined, but intact, kitchen stall. "This open kitchen," she declared, her voice resonating with a power that chilled the blood, "will now serve as an open court." She looked at Kestrel Vaunt, 100 meters away. "Director Vaunt, Magister Corvine, You will, of course, wish to remain, as will all diplomatic parties. The Concord broadcast will remain live. We will have our transparency. We will have it now. Vaughnt's smile faltered. This was not in his plan. Celine turned back to Noah. The medics were still trying to lift him. "Stop," she commanded. "Matriarch," the lead medic protested. "He will die. He is in hemorrhagic shock." "The logs!" Noah gasped, his vision tunneling. "The stall. The operating system. Vaughnt's signature. It is still there. If they cut the power, it is gone." Celine understood. She trusted him. "He does not move," she ordered. "Bring the trauma pack. Bring the coagulants. Stabilize him here. He has testimony to give." The medics, stunned by the command, obeyed. They swarmed him, injecting him with stimulants, coagulants, and a pain blocker so powerful it made the world shimmer. The white-hot agony in his side receded, replaced by a dull, massive throb. A biofoam patch was sealed over the wound, stopping the bleeding but leaving the rebar, grotesquely, in place. They propped him up against the stall. He was a mess. He was pale, sweating, and shaking. But the fog in his mind cleared, replaced by the cold, precise focus of the pain blocker. His eyes, burning in his pale face, found Celine. "I need," he panted, "my yeast, my personal stash, and flour, water. I have to bake." "He is delirious," the medic said. "No," Arya said, her small, clear voice cutting through. She and Nix had been cowering by the stall. Now, they emerged, their royal gowns stained, their faces streaked with tears, but their eyes hard. "He is a kitchen wizard. He is making proof." Nix, scrambling like a little spider, darted into the back of the stall and emerged with a sealed silver packet. "The do not touch this, or you will die yeast, chef." Noah gave a weak, grim smile. "That is the one. Bring it." The crowd, and the entire broadcast audience, watched in stunned, bewildered silence as the bleeding human chef, propped up by a medical team, began to mix ingredients in a bowl. "What is this?" "This mummery," Corvine shouted from his gantry, his voice laced with uncertainty. "This," Noah said, his voice a strained rasp, amplified by a medic's comm unit, "is the oath bread." He began to mix, his hands, one sure, one shaking, working the dough. A recipe of the hearth order. It is not just food. It is a diagnostic program, a truth serum for a kitchen. "It is human witchcraft," Corvine accused. "It is science," Noah retorted. He looked at the main holo display, still active on the side of his stall. "And this is the witness." He put the small, pale lump of dough into the oven. "The starlight yeast is sensitive. It reacts to temperature, to energy, to time. My recipe, the one in the stall's operating system, is precise. A specific heat for a specific time." He tapped the console, his bloody fingers staining the controls. "And the system logs everything, the command, and the execution." "This is madness," Vaughnt's voice, cold and furious, suddenly cut in over the broadcast. "The man is dying. He is rambling." The broadcast feed flickered. A static bar appeared. "We are experiencing technical difficulties," a smooth, automated voice announced. Celine's head snapped up. "No! The frosting!" Nix shrieked. "Arya, he is burning the brioche." The two small girls were sitting side by side, their backs to the chaos, their small data slates in their laps. To the security teams, they looked like two terrified children, hiding in a game. "I am adding the frosting, Nix," Arya murmured, her own small fingers flying across the screen of her slate. The Syndicate firewall is very crunchy, but this Star-Baker interface is surprisingly robust. Use the rainbow sprinkles, Nix advised, her own fingers a blur. They bypass the primary authentication server. The broadcast feed, which had almost cut to black, suddenly stabilized. But it was now a split screen. On the left, Noah, pale and sweating over his oven. On the right, a bright, cartoon graphic of a baking game, with two avatars, labeled Area and Nix, furiously throwing cartoon sprinkles at a cartoon firewall. In his rotunda, Kestrel Vaunt stared at his console. He had been locked out of his own system by a children's game. As I was saying, Noah panted, leaning heavily against the oven. He pointed to the holographic log. The crowd, the cameras, everyone leaned in. This is the recipe, my command. Recipe Oathbread. Preheat 200°C. Hold 10 min. And this is the execution. They all saw it. CMD heat oven 200°C sys. 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 Exe heat oven 200°C delay 4.81 seconds. 4. Noah took a rasping breath. 0.81 seconds. An error. A glitch. But look. He ran the command again. CMD heat, oven 200°C swis. Swis. Exe heat, oven 200°C. Delay. 3.92 seconds. It is not a glitch, Noah said. It is variable. It is malicious. It is the lag. I have been fighting for weeks. It is sabotage. He pointed to the oven. And this is the result. He opened the oven door. The oath bread was a disaster. The starlight yeast, subjected to a fluctuating, unpredictable heat, had collapsed. One side was raw, the other was burned. The recipe is the proof, Noah said. This lag, this virus, it is the same one that caused the repair bots at the dockyard to malfunction. He pulled up the dockyard logs on his console, his fingers flying. He isolated the lag signature. He placed it next to the kitchen log. They were identical. A signature, Noah whispered. An artist's mark. This proves nothing, Vaunt's voice boomed, but it was tight with panic. A coincidence? A faulty system? This is a farce. It is not a farce, Noah said, his voice growing stronger, fueled by adrenaline and the hot core of his rage. A signature is something you cultivate. You perfect it. You use it again and again. He opened a third file, a small, personal, encrypted file he had carried with him for 10 years. This, he said, is the final diagnostic report from my restaurant. The accident that destroyed my life. The fire. The one you called collateral damage. He ran the diagnostic. He isolated the malicious code that had overloaded his ovens. He placed it on the screen. The kitchen signature, the dockyard signature, the restaurant fire signature. They were not just identical. They were the same. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Kestrel Vaunt, the architect of the sabotage, was exposed. But Celine's voice was soft, but carried. She was leading him, helping him build the case. The dockyard, the palace kitchens, these are nocturne systems. How could a human, even one from the Syndicate, gain access? He needed a key, Noah said, his body screaming in agony. He needed a sponsor, an invitation, a key old enough to bypass modern security, a key of blood. He ran the final diagnostic. He searched for the access key that had allowed the lag virus into the system kernel. The screen flashed. It was not a password. It was not a string of code. It was a complex, biological marker, a unique sequence of ancient, nocturne blood proteins. Access granted. Biological key 004, a registered user. Magister Corvine, on his gantry, let out a sound like a dying animal. No, it was a holy ward, a ritual. He said it was a curse to cleanse the bridge of the human taint, not to break it. You ancient, superstitious fool, Vaunt screamed, his mask of civility finally, utterly shattered. He was on camera, his face purple with rage. You were a tool, my tool. It was over. Concord security teams, who had been holding the perimeter, began to advance, their weapons raised. One team moved toward Vaunt. The other, repulsor lifts engaged, flew toward Corvine's gantry. But it was not over for Noah. He was staring at the code, Vaunt's signature. He was inside the kernel, and deep inside, buried under Vaunt's virus. He saw his code, the original, ancient, Hearth order-based code that his grandfather had taught him. And he saw the failsafe, a line of script he had only ever heard about in legends. A failsafe for a compromised kitchen. It was called the hearth lock, the oven lock. He could trigger it. With one command. It was a counter-virus. It would follow Vaunt's signature, his artist's mark, back through the network. It would not just lock Vaunt out. It would lock him down. It would freeze every asset, every account, every ship, every station control tied to that signature. It would, in effect, burn Kestrel Vaunt's entire corporate existence to the ground. It was revenge. It was total. It was absolute. He saw the fire from 10 years ago. He saw the faces of his staff, his friends. He saw the smirking face of the man who had called their lives collateral damage. His fingers, bloody and shaking, moved to the console. Revenge burns the house down, and you with it. Choose justice, Celine's voice. He looked at the data. He saw Vaunt, but he also saw the lists, the syndicate pension funds, tied to Vaunt's access, the food supply chains for the Spire's lower levels, the payrolls for 10,000 engineers, pilots, and janitors, the collateral damage. He would not just be burning Vaunt. He would be burning them all. He would be him. Noah took a deep, shuddering breath. The fire in his eyes, the cold, white-hot rage, receded. It did not go out. It banked, settling into the warm, steady glow of a hearth. He looked at Celine, who was watching him, holding her breath. She was not just watching a man. She was watching a choice. His fingers moved, but not to the hearth lock. He hit a different sequence. Package evidence. Encrypt. Send to Concord Tribunal. Send to Orphean Spire Media Archive. Send to Madre Ojea Umbra Grounds. He added the last one with a grim smile. She would know what to do with it. I am a chef, he whispered, his voice for Celine alone. I do not burn kitchens. I protect them. He was done. The Concord security teams had Vaunt in cuffs. He was not fighting. He was just standing there, his pristine white suit ruined, his face a mask of cold, silent hate. Corvine was babbling, weeping about blood purity as they led him away. The crowd, the entire Concord, had seen everything. The proof was absolute. The silence was broken by a single sound. The head engineer, the one from the dockyard, began to clap. A slow, steady, rhythmic sound. Then another joined. Then a human senator. Then the entire crowd. It was a rising thunder. It was not for the matriarch. It was for the human. The chef. The man who had refused to die. Who had solved the crime while bleeding on the floor. Who had turned his kitchen into a court. And his bread into a verdict. Celine walked to him. The medics were already moving in, their faces grim. Noah, she said, her voice soft. He looked up at her. He saw her, not as a matriarch, but as the woman who had trusted him. He saw the awe in her eyes, the respect. She saw the choice he had made. She saw the man who was strong enough to not burn his enemy. The man who was strong enough to not turn his hearth into a funeral pyre. He tried to smile. The pain, held back by adrenaline, was returning. A vast, dark ocean. "The dinner service," he rasped, his eyes losing focus, "is complete." He looked at Arya and Nyx, who were rushing toward him, their faces pale. "It is a good recipe," he whispered, and he let go. His head fell back against the steel, and the thunderous, roaring applause of the umbral bridge was the last thing he heard as the blackness finally, mercifully, claimed him. Noah woke to the smell of antiseptic and filtered air. This was not the rich, complex aroma of a kitchen, or the cold, ancient dust of the Nocturne Palace. This was the sterile, neutral territory of a high-end medical bay. He was alive. He cataloged the feelings. A deep, profound ache in his ribs, which felt tightly bound. A dull, throbbing echo where the rebar had been. His hands, when he tried to move them, felt heavy and weak, the palms bandaged. He remembered the searing heat of the girder. He opened his eyes. The light was a soft, pale, artificial white. He was in a private room. The technology was Concord standard, sleek and impersonal. He was not in the Nocturne territories. This was neutral ground. "He is awake." He turned his head. The movement was stiff, pulling at the synthetic stitches in his side. Madre Ojea filled the doorway. Her crystalline, multifaceted form was a blinding, comforting rainbow in the sterile room. She was holding a large, insulated travel mug in one of her 4 lower hands. "Madre," his voice was a dry croak. "Do not try to talk, little chef," she rumbled, her voice like a gentle avalanche. She moved to his bedside, which was a significant feat of maneuvering. "You have been asleep for 3 days. You almost did not invoice them." He tried to smile, but it was a pained grimace. The cafe is fine," she said, her multifaceted eyes softening to an amber glow. "It is, in fact, busier than it has been in 5 years. It seems," she added, her voice laced with dry humor, "that we are the official home of the Hearthlock hero. A terrible name. The media is a fool, but they are paying fools." "What? What happened?" "You happened, Noah Grant," she said, her voice serious. She held the mug to his lips. "This is not that Nocturne blood tea. This is my own blend, Talvian. It fixes holes. You have many holes." He drank. The liquid was hot, bitter, and tasted like the earth. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. "The bake-off trial, as the media is calling it, changed everything," she explained, as he drank. "That file you sent me. That was a very good recipe. I forwarded it to some friends at the Concord Tribunal. They were not pleased. The news," she explained, "had been explosive. The live feed had been seen by billions. The evidence was irrefutable. The Auraline Syndicate is being restructured," she said, "with the satisfaction of a Talvian who has just closed a very favorable deal. The Concord Tribunal, for the first time in a century, had the political will to act. They froze Vaught's personal and corporate assets. The entire board is being investigated." "The workers," Noah whispered, remembering his choice. "That," Madre Ojea said, her gaze sharp and proud, "was your part. The Hearthlock. They saw what you could have done, and what you chose not to do. When the tribunal saw that you had intentionally spared the pensions and payrolls of 10,000 workers. They understood. They have seized all of Vaught's personal holdings and all corporate profits from his project. That is what they are calling his crimes, and created a retraining and relocation fund for every employee whose livelihood was tied to his signature. Noah closed his eyes. The relief was so profound it hurt almost as much as his side. He had not burned the kitchen. He had saved its staff. And Celine the Clades. That, Madre Oheye said, a new note of complexity in her voice, is evolving. Magister Corvine had been tried, not by the Concord, but by his own people. The Nocturne Conclave, horrified and shamed by the public revelation, had convened an emergency session. Corvine, stripped of his titles, his lands, and his ancient honors, was now in exile, banished to a deep strata monastery, his pure blood a stain on their reputation. And Celine Valor, she is a matriarch, Madre said, her respect clear. 2 days ago, she stood before the conclave, before the entire Concord broadcast, and she apologized. She had not apologized for the bridge. She had apologized, Noah learned, for the vacuum. She had admitted that her own grief, her own isolation, had allowed a power vacuum to form in her court, a place where the blind prejudice of Corvine and the cold greed of Vaunt could fester. She had, in a move that had stunned the diplomatic world, taken full, personal responsibility for the entire affair. She has started a full reform of the conclave, Madre finished. She is cleaning house, with a very large, very sharp broom. A soft chime at the door interrupted them. Madre Oheye sighed, a sound like wind through a crystal cave. Ah, the other part of your recovery. The door slid open, and Arya and Nyx tumbled in. They were not in their royal gowns. They were in simple, dark trousers and tunics, their black hair tied back. They were, Noah thought, a terrifying combination of 6-year-old energy and 1,000-year-old authority. They were also carrying a large, covered basket. "He is not dead," Nyx announced, her silver eyes wide with analytical relief. "His color is returning. His heart rate is stable. Nyx, I told you the monitor was accurate," Arya said. Ever the pragmatist, she marched to his bedside. "Madre Oheye, we are taking over the feeding schedule. Mother has authorized it." Madre Oheye actually chuckled, a sound like falling rocks. "Very well, little ones, but he is a baker. Do not insult him with bad food." "We are not fools," Arya said, with great dignity. "We brought assistance." She placed the basket on the rolling table and unveiled it. It was not food. It was a bowl of dough, a small bag of flour, a jar of crystal honey, and a small shaker. What is this?" Noah asked, his voice still weak. "This," Arya said, pointing to the dough, "is a failure." "It is flat," Nyx declared, her voice full of disgust. "We tried to make your moon brioche. It is sad." "We have determined," Arya continued, her hands on her hips, "that you are an essential component in the recipe. We cannot, need, like you do." Noah looked at the sad, gray lump of dough, and then at the two small, serious faces. He understood. This was not a delivery. It was a command. "You are," Nyx said, her voice stern, "not eating properly. The medical food is an insult." "And Mother says," Arya added, "that you are to be forcibly encouraged to eat real food, but we cannot make it, and you are not allowed to stand. So," Nyx concluded, pushing the bowl toward him, "you will teach us, from the bed, and then we will all eat. It is a very efficient plan." Noah looked at the mess of ingredients, at the two small, determined faces, at the sterile medical room. His side throbbed. He felt weak, but he also felt the call, the hearth. "All right," he croaked, pushing himself up on one elbow. You overproofed it, you little monsters. We know, Nix wailed. And hand me that shaker, Arya. What is in that? It is an experiment, Arya said, suddenly shy. It is salt, sea salt, from the reclamation vats. We thought the honey is very sweet, but the taste of the air on the bridge, the day, it was salty, like tears. Noah stared at her. Honey and salt, sweetness and sorrow. An interesting combination, Noah said, his voice thick. He took the honey. He took the salt. Let's not make brioche, he said. Let's make something new. For the next week, the medical bay became a different kind of kitchen. Noah, propped up in his bed, directed the two most powerful children in the spire. They were terrible, chaotic, and wonderful apprentices. They made a mess. They burned 3 batches of simple pastries. They argued over who got to add the honey, and they invented. They called them sun bites. A simple, flaky pastry, but with a center of crystal honey, and then, right on top, a single, sharp, bright crystal of sea salt. The taste was a shock, a wave of pure, golden sweetness, followed by a sharp, bright burst of salt that made the honey taste more real, not less. It was sweetness and pain. It was, Noah thought, the taste of living. Arya and Nix forcibly encouraged him to eat 3 a day. His strength returned. The day he was finally cleared to walk. His first trip was not to the palace. It was not even to Umbra grounds. It was to the Umbral Bridge. It was finished. The conquered engineers, working with the Nocturne, had followed his plans to the letter. The repairs were seamless. The open arches soared, the crimson light of the star mixing with the soft, warm glow from the kitchen promenade. The communal tables were set. The flow, from the decompression gallery to the kitchens to the rotunda, was perfect. It was quiet. The bridge had been officially rededicated, but not yet open to the public. It was waiting. He walked to the center, to his stall, the one he had bled on. It was pristine, the alloy polished, the systems online. He ran a hand over the cool metal. He felt the faint, phantom throb in his side. It is much cleaner. He turned. Selene was standing there. She was not in her royal robes or her tactical suit. She was in a simple, dark, civilian tunic and trousers. Her black hair was down, falling over one shoulder. She looked younger, and so tired. The cleaning crews were very thorough, she said, her voice soft. They are great admirers of your work. They stood in silence for a moment, the vast, quiet bridge stretching out around them, a bridge between worlds, a bridge they had built. The bridge is open, she said. The people are using it. They are eating together. The Talvians are apparently obsessed with your sun bites. Arya and Nix are a very aggressive marketing team, Noah said, a small smile touching his lips. The silence returned, but this time it was heavier. It was filled with everything they had not said. Noah, she began, turning to face him. Her violet eyes were afraid. He had never seen her afraid. I never had the chance to thank you. You did, he said. You sent me a battalion of small, bossy pastry chefs. Her mouth quirked. They are effective. But for what you did, for my children, for the bridge, and for what you chose not to do, the hearthlock. I saw that. The entire tribunal saw it. I am a chef, Selene, he said, his voice quiet. That is all I have ever been. I do not burn kitchens, even if they are full of Poopy heads. She laughed, a real, surprised, beautiful sound that echoed in the open arch. The sound faded, and her expression grew serious again. "You spoke of the Hearth Order," she said. He nodded, his hand instinctively touching the embroidered symbol on his new, clean jacket. "My grandfather. It was his. He taught me. He said the order was gone, that it failed." "It did not fail," she said softly. "It went into hiding. Like you. When the great commercial guilds, like the early Aura line, began to rise, they saw the order as a threat, a guild not based on profit, but on community, on sharing. They were hunted." "The fire," Noah said, the pieces clicking into place. "The fire that burned your restaurant was not the first," Celine said, her voice heavy with a history he did not know. "The Hearth Order saved you. They took you from the ashes, and then they vanished. To protect you, they let you believe they were just legends. They let you hide in the shadows." I abandoned them," Noah said, a wave of old, familiar shame washing over him. "I was afraid. I hid. I spent 10 years hiding, just trying to be safe." Celine stepped closer. She was so close now. He could feel the faint, cool aura that she radiated. "You were not hiding, Noah. You were simmering. You were concentrating. All that fear, all that grief. You turned it into something else." She looked up at him, her violet eyes searching his. I understand that. Hiding. My bondmate. My husband. He was the architect of this bridge." Noah's breath caught. "Celine. He designed it," she said, her voice a whisper, her gaze distant, looking at the soaring arches. "He was very much like you. He believed in this, in emotional architecture. He believed that a meal, a shared space, could change the world. He was an idealist." She looked down. "He died 5 years ago. Not in a battle, not in a fire. A simple, stupid transport malfunction. A meaningless accident. And I hid. I hid behind the matriarch. I hid behind my duty. My ice. I promised. I promised I would finish this bridge. It was all I had left of him. But it was just metal. A promise. And then it became a prison. A duty. I forgot. I forgot to live. I forgot to eat." She looked back up at him, and her eyes were shining. "And then you, and your buns. You crashed into my perfectly controlled, perfectly cold life. You reminded me what home tasted like. You did not just save the bridge. Noah, you saved his bridge. You saved me." He saw it now. The fear, not of him, but of this, of feeling, the terror of loving something, only to have a meaningless accident steal it away. He understood that fear. He had lived in its shadow for a decade. "Celine," he said, his voice hoarse. He was not the only one who lost someone. The fire. It was not just my restaurant. It was my home." "I know," she whispered. They stood there, 2 survivors, on a bridge built by one ghost and saved by another. He did not know who moved first. Perhaps it was him. Perhaps it was her. But his bandaged hand found hers, her cool, strong fingers laced with his warm, scarred ones. It was not a passionate kiss. It was not a kiss of victory or of conquest. It was a kiss of Recognition. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Her lips were cool, and tasted faintly of the bridge's metal and the night's cold. His were warm, and tasted of salt and honey. It was a gentle, almost hesitant kiss. It was a promise. Not of forever. Not of anything. It was a promise that they were here, that the fire was over, that the ice had melted. It was a kiss that tasted sane. When they parted, they just stood for a moment, their hands still linked, their foreheads resting against each other. Your kitchen is getting cold, she whispered, a small smile in her voice. It will heat up, he murmured back. A small, discreet cough echoed from the end of the bridge. They sprang apart, like guilty teenagers. Arya and Nyx were standing there. Arya was pointedly studying a join in the alloy. Nyx was grinning, her small, sharp fangs fully displayed. We do not want to interrupt, Nyx said, dragging the words out in a sing-song voice. We are just here to confirm, Arya said, pulling out a small, official data slate, that the new Director of Cultural and Culinary Affairs for Orphean Spire is aware of his new duties. Noah blinked. Director of what you, Celine said. Her composure regained, though a faint, violet blush colored her high cheekbones. The Conquered was impressed, and I was persuasive. The position is yours. To oversee all of this, to make emotional architecture a permanent part of the spire. I am a chef, Noah stammered. I run. I have a cafe. You can keep your cafe, Celine said, her smile returning, full of its old, dry humor. But you will also have this, your communal table, unless you prefer to go back into the shadows. Noah looked at her. He looked at the two small, grinning girls. He looked at the vast, beautiful, open bridge, shining in the crimson twilight. He thought of the safety of Umbra grounds, the quiet, the anonymity. He looked at Celine, at the promise of more, of a life not spent hiding, but building. Well, he said, taking a deep breath of the cool, metallic air. I suppose someone has to make sure the buns are proofed correctly. He accepted. That night, the umbral bridge was truly, fully open. The lights from the kitchen promenade, a soft, warm, golden glow, spilled out onto the deck. The station, orbiting its red star, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The red light was softer, the shadows were gentler, the fire was over, the house was still warm. The first intercultural festival on the Umbral Bridge was not a festival. It was, as Nyx declared to a visiting Conquered senator, a very large, very loud dinner party, and you are late for the soup. The bridge was alive. For 3 full rotations of the spire, it was a river of sound, scent, and color. Noah, as the new Director of Cultural and Culinary Affairs, had not designed a menu. He had, with Celine's full political backing, created a memory map. He had sent out a simple call to every territory in the spire. Send us the recipe that tastes like your home. The response had been overwhelming. Now, his kitchen promenade, once a symbol of conflict, was a roaring, joyful, chaotic success. At his stall, which he had renamed the Hearth, he and a team of new apprentices, all from the Displaced Syndicate Worker Fund, were serving his sunbites. Next to him, a team of 6-limbed Talvian rock bakers was sculpting molten sugar art, handing it to laughing human children. Further down, a quiet, hooded nocturne elder, who had been a fierce opponent of Celine's reforms, had been convinced to set up a small, elegant stall. He was serving tiny, thimble-sized cups of a rich, dark, synthetic blood tea. And to his visible confusion, a line of human diplomats was waiting patiently to try it. The menu was the community. The smells of Talvian mineral broth, human barbecue, and nocturne cool herbs mingled with the constant, warm, underlying aroma of star yeast bread. The bridge, Noah thought, wiping sweat from his brow, finally smelled right. It smelled like a city. Celine found him during a brief lull in the second day. She was not wearing her formal robes, but a simple, practical dark jacket. She looked happy, tired, but happy. "Director Grant," she said, her voice full of a formal, teasing humor. "I have a complaint." "Matriarch," Noah said, handing her a sunbite, his hands, now almost fully healed, moving with their old, sure grace. "Please file it with my assistants." He nodded to Arya and Nyx, who were sitting on a nearby counter. Officially, tasting a new batch of honey. Nyx had a data slate and was, apparently, taking notes, which mostly consisted of drawing a small, fanged monster, giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. "My complaint," Celine said, ignoring the pastry and taking his hand, her cool fingers lacing with his, "is that I have not seen you for 6 hours. And my other complaint," she added, her violet eyes finding his, "is that you are a terrible influence." She nodded toward the main concourse. A Concord-wide broadcast was playing on all the screens. It was not a news report. It was an official announcement. A new, gleaming logo appeared a stylized hearth, inside a circle of wheat. "The Concord Tribunal," a smooth, official voice announced, "in partnership with the Reformed Nocturne Convocation, is proud to announce the formation of the Hearth Schools program." Noah watched, stunned. The announcer continued, "A new initiative, based on the principles of social flow and communal design, dedicated to the lost arts of reconciliation, cultural exchange, and culinary diplomacy." The screen changed. It showed a schematic of a university. Then it showed him. It was a still image from the bake-off trial, but it was not the image of him, bloody and broken. It was a shot taken seconds later, of him looking at the code, his face a mask of furious, focused intelligence. He looked, he thought with a jolt, like a leader. "This new, multi-species curriculum," the voice concluded, "will be headed by its new director, a man who has proven that a kitchen can be a court, and that a recipe can be a resolution. Director Noah Grant." The broadcast ended. The crowd on the bridge, who had been watching, turned as one, and they applauded. It was not the desperate, shocked applause of the trial. It was warm. It was real. Noah felt his face flush. He was not used to this. He was not used to the light. Celine squeezed his hand. "Terrible influence," she murmured. "Now, they want everyone to bake bread and talk about their feelings." "It is a start," Noah said, his voice thick. "It is," she agreed. "But it is not the whole story, is it?" "The story is not done," a small, clear voice said. Arya had hopped off the counter. She was wiping her sticky hands on her tunic, her face set in its usual, serious expression. "There is a final ingredient," she said. "A secret." Nyx chirped, hopping down to join her sister. "A secret? Recipe?" Noah and Celine looked at each other. The festival was roaring around them, a wave of happy, communal noise. But in this small circle, a sudden, intense quiet had fallen. "What do you mean, Arya?" Celine asked, her gaze sharpening. "Not here," Arya said, her silver eyes sweeping the crowd. "The kitchen wizard is right. This is a good recipe. But you have forgotten. The first recipe. The oath bread." "We need more oath bread," Nyx said, grabbing Noah's hand. The real one. The one you made. Nix, it was just a diagnostic, Noah said, confused. No, Arya said, her voice insistent. It was a key. And you are a lock. Now, come on. The festival can run itself for 1 hour. Celine looked at her daughters. He saw her, the matriarch, assessing them. They were not just excited. They were determined. They were on a mission. The same mission they had been on when they first walked into his cafe. Very well, Celine said, her voice dropping into a low, private tone. Show us. Arya and Nyx did not lead them to the palace. They did not lead them to the dockyard. They led them down a small, unmarked service corridor, deep into the station's oldest, unpolished bedrock levels. The air grew cooler, quieter. They stopped at a door. It was not a door. It was a circle of plain, ancient stone, seamlessly sealed into the wall. It was marked with a single, faint, almost invisible symbol, a stylized brick hearth. Noah's breath caught. He reached out and touched his own embroidered jacket. Then, the symbol on the door. They were identical. What is this? He whispered. The ancient hearth room, Arya said, as if this was obvious. It has been sealed for 500 years. We were not allowed to open it. Until now, Nyx added, bouncing on her toes. How do you open it? Celine asked, her hand moving to the small pulse knife she always wore at her belt. She was on edge. We do not, Arya said. She turned her silver eyes to Noah. You do. Me, I do not know how. Yes, you do, Nyx said, pushing him forward. You are the lock, but, she sighed, with all the drama of her small body. You do not have the key. We need the bread. Noah looked at his hands. He looked at Celine. He was a chef. He was in a stone corridor, in front of a secret door. This, he muttered to himself, is the strangest kitchen I have ever been in. He turned. I will need a portable oven. Boring, Nyx said. We brought assistance. Arya whistled. A high, sharp, two-note sound. A small, floating, spherical drone, the kind used for precise medical deliveries, zipped around the corner. On its back was a micro-induction heater and a small, sealed packet. My yeast, Noah said, stunned. We liberated it from your lab, Arya said, without a trace of guilt. Now, please, bake. The real one. The way you did on the bridge. The one. From memory. He did. In the silence of the ancient corridor, Noah Grant mixed flour, water, salt, and the precious, living starlight yeast. He was not just baking. He was praying. He was concentrating. He was pouring every ounce of his memory, his pain, his confusion, his hope, into the small, pale lump of dough. He did not use the induction heater. When the dough was needed, he looked at the stone door. The hearth, he whispered. He placed the raw loaf directly on the stone symbol. Now what? Celine asked. Now. We read the recipe, Noah said. He closed his eyes. He spoke the words his grandfather had taught him, the words he had whispered on the bridge, the words of the order. By the hearth and the flame, he said, his voice clear and strong. The bread is the bond. The meal is the treaty. Open the oven. Serve the meal. At first, nothing happened. Then, a faint, deep red glow began to emanate from the stone. It was not hot. It was a light. The light flowed into the small loaf of dough, and the bread began to rise. They watched, breathless. The dough did not just rise. It changed. As the yeast activated, it did not just puff. It formed patterns. The surface of the bread, in the glowing red light, formed a complex, swirling sigil. It looked like a lock, like a key, with a deep, grinding groan, like a sigh held for centuries. The stone circle on the door receded. The light on the bread faded. The door was open. The room inside was dark, and it smelled of ash, a cold, old, dead ash. "After you, Chef Wizard," Nyx whispered, her cheekiness gone, replaced by a profound, childish awe. Noah picked up the baked, warm, and now strangely patterned loaf of oath bread. He and Celine stepped inside, followed by the two girls. The room was a large, circular chamber, cut from the same bedrock. In the center was a single, massive, stone table, and on the table, a single, glowing plaque, a memory plaque. But it was dark. It is a memory vault," Celine whispered, her voice full of reverence. "This is a nocturne vault, from the first accord." "It is a hearth vault," Arya corrected, just as softly. "It is where the first treaty was signed, the one that was lost." "It is empty," Noah said, approaching the table. The plaque was dark. "It is waiting," Arya said. She pointed to the center of the plaque. There was a depression, a hollow. It was perfectly shaped. It was shaped like his oath bread. He looked at the bread in his hand. He looked at the depression. He felt Celine's hand on his back, steadying him. He placed the loaf. The bread fit. It slotted into the depression with a soft, perfect click. The room, the plaque, the very air, lit up. Holograms, ghosts of light, flickered to life. The room was suddenly filled with figures. Ancient humans, in robes he recognized from his grandfather's drawings. And Nocturne. Not in diplomatic silks, but in ancient, hard-edged armor. "This," Celine breathed. "This is the signing of the first Concord. The one Vaunt was trying to find." They watched, stunned, as the ghosts played out their scene. They argued. They fought. And then, one figure, a human, stood up. He was not a soldier. He was a baker. He held up a loaf of bread, and he began to speak the words, "By the hearth and the flame." "But the Concord architect," Noah whispered, his mind racing. "The one who wrote the treaty." A single figure in the hologram. A young, dark-haired human with a familiar, determined set to his jaw, turned. He looked, not at the ghosts, but at Noah. A line of text, in the glowing, golden script of the Hearth Order, burned in the air above the figure. Identity Concord Architect name, Noah Grant. Status, sealed. Reason, Oraline persecution. H-Lock protocol. Engaged. Noah stumbled back, his knees weak. "No. That is me. No. I wrote that. The memories, locked away, burned away by the trauma of the fire, came rushing back. Not as a chef, but as a young, idealistic architect, a member of the secret, reborn Hearth Order. He had been the one. He had written the treaty, the emotional architecture that had been the foundation for the entire cultural exchange. You think that fire was even about Yvonne's voice. The dispatch was sent to kill the conquered architect. You were just collateral damage. It was me, Noah whispered, his legs giving out. Celine caught him, her arms strong around his waist. It was, always, me. They sealed it, Celine said, her mind, as sharp as any blade, putting the pieces together. The hearth order, after the fire, after the attack, they hid you. They sealed your memory, your identity. They let you believe you were just a chef. They let you hide in the shadows to keep you safe. Until the time was right. The bread, Noah said, his mind reeling. The oath bread. It is the key. It unlocks the identity. The yeast. My blood. It confirms the signature. He looked at Arya and Nyx, who were watching him with an ancient, profound sadness. You knew, he whispered. You knew. When you walked into my cafe. How Arya and Nyx looked at each other. They took a deep, synchronized breath. And they changed. It was not a physical transformation. Not at first. It was in their eyes. The silver. It was no longer the bright, sharp silver of a child. It deepened. It grew. Heavy. Weighed down by time. By centuries. We are not children, Chef Wizard, Nyx's voice said. But the cheeky lisp was gone. Her voice was a harmony of two tones, one young, one impossibly old. We are, Arya's voice joined, in the same, strange, harmonic resonance. The twin bodies of the bridge oath. We are its guardians. When your ancestor, Nyx, or the thing in Nyx, continued, signed the first accord. He did not trust metal. He demanded a living oath. He demanded guardians, who would hold the treaty, not in silicon, but in life. The matriarch of that day, Arya Thing said, offered us a strategic dual-form entity. We bound ourselves to the bridge, to its ideal, to its recipe. Celine gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The legend. The caged princesses. I thought it was a myth, a children's story, that two royal daughters were bound, trapped, in child form, by an ancient curse. It was not a curse, Arya said, her voice now filled with a deep, echoing sorrow. It was an oath. We are bound. We are trapped in this form until the bridge is truly complete, until the promise of the oath bread is fulfilled. Noah stared at them, his heart breaking. The two small, vibrant, bossy, wonderful children. They were prisoners. You found me, he said. We have been watching. For a long time, Nyx's ancient voice whispered. We have watched. So many. Architects. So many diplomats. All of them failed. They built with metal, with greed, with walls. But we sensed you. We could feel the hearth, Arya said. It was dim. It was broken, hidden, but it was there. The true key. Your blind date, Noah breathed, the words catching in his throat. The lunchbox. The incident at the dockyard. We arranged it, Nyx said, a ghost of her cheeky grin returning. We knew that Director Vaunt would cheat. We encouraged him. We needed a test. A test, Celine said, her voice sharp. We had to know, Arya said, her small, ancient face turning to Noah. We had to know if you were the one. We We had to wait until you chose, until you had the power to burn your enemy. And you chose justice. You chose the kitchen. You chose to rebuild. Nyx finished, her small, cold hand finding his. Not to take revenge. The weight of it all settled on him. The centuries of their waiting, their sacrifice, their desperate, cosmic gamble. My God, Noah whispered. All this time, Celine stepped forward. She did not look at her daughters. She looked at these ancient, terrible, brave beings. She knelt. The matriarch of the Nocturne Clades knelt. Your watch is over, she said, her voice thick with tears. He chose. Arya and Nyx just looked at each other, and a new, bright, real light dawned in their silver eyes. Celine turned her gaze to Noah. She was still kneeling. She took his hand, not his scarred chef's hand, but his hand. Thank you, Noah Grant, she whispered, her voice breaking. Not for saving the bridge, not for saving my daughters. Thank you for choosing right. Thank you for being you. He pulled her to her feet. He looked at the ghosts, at the plaque, at the two small, ancient beings who were, he realized, his family. He thought of the ashes of his old restaurant, the fire, the pain, the 10 years, lost in the shadows. He looked at Celine, at her hand, in his, and he felt the warmth, the gentle, steady, unbeatable warmth of the hearth, now burning not just on his wrist, but in his chest. He had to say something. The moment was too heavy. He let out a long, slow breath. Well, he said, his voice a little shaky, but his own. It is just like I always suspected. Celine looked at him, her tear-filled eyes confused. What? My whole life, he said, a small, real smile tugging at his lips. It was all just activated by starlight yeast. Celine stared at him for one long second. The matriarch, the grieving widow, the commander, and she laughed. She threw back her head, and a real, unrestrained, joyous laugh filled the ancient, dusty room. And, she said, catching her breath, her hand finding his, it was needed by family. He squeezed her hand. Come on. I think the directors of this festival are needed. They left the hearth room. Noah sealed it. With a touch, he did not need the bread anymore. He was the key. They walked back, the four of them, into the light, into the noise, into the life of the bridge, as they stepped out onto the promenade, into the warm, golden light of the kitchens. Nyx and Arya ran ahead. They ran to the central control panel, the one Noah had designed. Chef Wizard, Nyx shouted, her voice different. It was just Nyx. The cheekiness was back. The ancient, harmonic echo was gone. Look, Arya shouted, her voice just a girl's. We are turning on the house lights. They both slammed a single, large, red button, and all along the great, soaring arches of the Umbral Bridge, a string of small, warm, golden lights blinked on. They were not spotlights. They were not diplomatic. They were house lights. They were the lights of a kitchen, of a home. They were the lights that said, "We are here. The meal is ready. Come in." The light, the warmth, spread over the crowd, and, with it, a sound, a single laugh. From a Talvian, who had just tried a sunbite. The laugh was infectious. A human picked it up. A nocturne snickered. The sound, the laughter. It spread, from the kitchens, to the tables, all the way down the bridge. A wave of joy. It spread, like the smell of fresh-baked bread. Celine tucked her arm in his. Noah leaned his head, just for a second, against hers. He was home. In the new era. The strongest recipe was still the recipe for being human.